Welcome to the issue 11 premiere of Jenny Magazine. I'm super excited that you all are here. Thank you for coming. When I started taking words, hold on, let me start that back over again. I have notes and I'm winging it and it's not the greatest thing, but oh well, here we go. When I took over being head editor of Jenny Magazine last year, I had wanted to try to do something like new with each issue. To keep Jenny fresh, to keep us trying like new things and experimenting and seeing what else we could do as a literary magazine. The last issue, issue 10, we did a 10-minute play contest, which was awesome. If any of you guys were here for that, you saw it. If you didn't, it's on our YouTube channel. You should check it out. It was pretty spectacular. And we got such a great response to that we actually have, for now at least, for this issue and the next issue that will be coming, that we'll be working on, issue 12. We're going to have a section for publishing 10-minute plays, so that's pretty cool. There's not a lot of places that do that. So that was pretty awesome. And for this one, we decided to do a specially themed issue where we only featured works by writers and artists who identify as female. I'm super excited about this because, you know, in general society and life, but also in publishing, there's like disparity between success with male and female creators, and so we kind of wanted to showcase some awesome women and also help do our part in addressing that disparity a little bit. And we got so many great submissions. This is probably the biggest amount of submissions I have seen since working on Jenny, and I've been here for a handful of years now. But I'm really excited to share this issue with you, so let's just go ahead and get started. Our first reader for tonight is Bridget Casson. Bridget Casson has been an instructor at Stark State College and Walsh University. She is currently a Neo Maffei student at Youngstown State University. And tonight she'll be reading from her piece, The Asaph Church Witch, 1826.
This is what happened. Jed, the older boy, doubled over at dinner, his eyes fluttering open and shut. He fell out of his chair to the ground with a thud, and at first his stepmother said, "Jedithan, quit horsing around," before Judah, the younger, shrieked and darted away from the table in terror. "Christ," the woman muttered upon standing. From her new vantage point, she could see the boy coiled up on the floor, writhing, dribble and food bits falling from his mouth. It was a wonder he hadn't yet choked. She hollered for her husband and knelt on the floor beside Jed, grabbing him by the shoulders. "Be still," she told him sternly. "If you flail, you will hurt yourself and me." In spite of her efforts, his arms and legs thrashed around as if on their own accord. The boy's father came in from the back of the house and saw his eldest lying prone and his youngest cowering in the corner behind the tea table. "What on God's good earth," he began, genuflecting beside his wife and laying hands on Jed to hold him still. "Flossie," cried Judah in the corner. "I want Flossie." The word transformed into a high, keening wail, but until Jed, finally exhausted, lay motionless on the ground, no one paid Judah any mind. Flossie Pumpkin Pile was a dark woman, a tall woman, a broad-shouldered woman. She could have been 20, or she could have been 45. Her dimensions were such that if she wore pants, she could easily be mistaken for a man, both from the front and the back. Her people, man and woman alike, kept their black hair long and straight, according to Pa, and there was nothing in her face that would readily betray her gender. Her people, according to Pa, had once lived all over Marion County and beyond, before the white settlers came in. Her people were Jed and Judah and Pa, according to Jed and Judah. Flossie worked for the Boatwells, who lived a few miles outside of Asaph town proper, for as long as both boys could remember. She came into their service, in fact, just a few months before their mother died, to take over the cooking and cleaning and the other household duties. Their mother had been sick with a cancer, said Pa. It was a mercy when she'd finally been taken. Flossie was not strict with the boys, but neither was she lax. She expected them to come back to the cabin from the wood for all 3 meals of the day with clean nails and without having to holler. If they tore a button off their jacket or pants, she taught them how to fasten it back themselves. She did not make them attend service on Sundays, even when she knew they were playing ill to avoid it. Once, when a foam-lipped raccoon wandered around their cabin, Flossie lured it close with a bowl of lunch's leftovers and then killed it with a rock against the back of its skull. She taught them the native names of all the birds and snakes and bugs they caught and brought to her. The boys loved her more fiercely than they loved one another. After several years, Pa met a woman in the city and decided to remarry. This is what started the talk of sending Flossie away. The woman didn't want people to think she wasn't up to the task of keeping house and raising children, even boys. There was no need for two women to do one job. And wouldn't she be more at home with her own people, Pa had asked Jed and Judah that night, tucking them into bed for the first time in their memory? She's been living with white folk too long. Their new mother wasn't bad to them, but neither was she good. She fixed all their torn and ripped clothing herself and babied them when combing their hair or wiping their teeth. She chattered throughout meals and scolded them if she didn't like their table manners. Her cornbread was dry. She didn't even know the white folk names of birds, and she shrieked if they brought her anything else. When a strange dog appeared outside, skinny as a stick and mewling with hunger, she shut the boys in the cabin with her until after dark, when Pa came home, and by then the dog was gone. That was all before Jed had fallen over at the dinner table, taken with a fit as though possessed. The doctor could find nothing wrong. "Let me call on the pastor," the woman said. "Pa," Judah said, "I want Flossie." Jed shot him a look from the bed, but Judah continued. "Flossie always knew what to do." "Has this happened before?" Pa said, sharp suddenly where he was soft before. "Has this gone on longer than I have been aware?" "I just mean Flossie took good care of us," Judah said. "I don't like the idea of her coming back here, John," said the woman, their stepmother. "That's what she wants." Pa sighed and left the room, and Judah got to sleep in his father's bed beside his brother for the night. The boys asked all the next day if Flossie could come to nurse Jed, but the woman said, "You seem fine now," and that was the end of it. When they were supposed to be asleep, the boys leaned over the edge of the loft and watched their father and mother discuss the matter over tea for her and whiskey for him. "I didn't want to say it before," said the woman. "I didn't want you to think me a silly, superstitious woman. But there's always been talk in town that she practiced some kind of native magic, hexes and spells and the like. Killed the Penham's cows because they would not sell her milk, and stunted all of Nancy's dogs' whelps just by giving them the evil eye." "Ridiculous," said Pa, and the boys were relieved to hear him stick up for her. "That is nothing but foolishness." "She came to you, and then your lawful Christian wife died," the woman said. "And then you were a bachelor with 2 children for far too long. The whole town knew you lived like heathens in these woods." And then she grew bold and asked, "Were you fucking her?" Pa remained silent. Jed and Judah pictured the pigs in the yard, how one would heft itself over another and grunt, grunt, grunt until the act was done. "You were under an enchantment," the woman continued. "That's what they say in town. And now she's cursed your boys since she's been cast aside for another." "I warn you, darling," said Pa, "this is treacherous territory. Mind where you walk." "Did you promise her marriage?" asked the woman. "Did you promise her children? Now she'll pay you back for breaking those promises by taking those that you already have." "There's no such thing as witches," Pa said finally. "With God," said the woman piously, "all things are possible."
Jessica Schnur graduated from the Solstice MFA program at Pine Manor College. She teaches in the General Studies Department at MSOE and Engineering College in Milwaukee. When she isn't teaching, she spends her time balancing too much long-distance running, reading, and writing a little bit of everything. Her story, "This Is Where I Say Goodbye," will be read by Bisan O'Day, who served as Jenny Issue 11 co-editor for Creative Nonfiction.
Starting line, watch time 0 minutes, 0 seconds. The starting horn blares over Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. A cheer starts at the front and undulates through the anxious throng of runners. My stomach rumbles beneath the violet fabric of my long-sleeve t-shirt. We shuffle forward, inch by inch. An elbow prods my ribs, a foot nudges mine. After what seems like hours, inches become feet. We're speed walking, jogging, running, I push the start button on my watch just as my left foot crosses the starting line. The pack loosens and I dash down Columbus Drive. Mile 1, watch time, 8 minutes, 1 second. The sound of the starting line music fades behind us as we pound forward and enter the dark cavernous stretch under the viaduct. We emerge into the bright light and cross the first bridge. Red carpet covers the metal grates, but I can still feel them through my shoes. It isn't so bad now, but later when my feet are sore, it will feel like hell. There are spectators everywhere. They line streets five deep on both sides. Everyone smiles and cheers as we run by. Today, everyone in Chicago is a running fan. I'm looking for him. Even among the crowds, he was taller than almost everyone else. I would look for his smile, his encouragement, but today I won't see him. I won't hear him scream, "Run, Anna, run," while he waves his arms above the rest of the crowd, so I can't miss him. Mile 2, watch time 16 minutes, 2 seconds. My pacing is perfect through 2 miles. My legs feel light and fast. During the Stanley Cup parade, we stood on the very sidewalk I am running past, scrunched up against the metal barrier. Red and white confetti rained down and pooled in the street, bits of it stuck in my hair and on his shoulders. He stood behind me with his arms wrapped around my waist, a shield against the flailing limbs of the intoxicated fan next to us. Eric shook his head at him and squeezed his arms so tightly around my waist that I could barely breathe. I could tell how badly he wanted a drink. I could see his fingers laced in front of my stomach. The nails of his right hands were dug so tightly into his left that small specks of red leaked from beneath them. Mile 3, watch time 24 minutes, 4 seconds. I grab my first cup of water from the aid station just past the 5K mark. The water splashes down the front of my shirt as I try to drink without stopping. I get enough into my mouth and toss the cup to the side of the road. We continue north on La Salle and run under the L tracks as a train rumbles overhead. We met on one of those trains, the Red Line, further north than where I am. He sat next to me even though the car was nearly empty. "What are you reading?" I didn't realize he was talking to me until I looked up directly into his eyes. I was reading a book about nutrition and running performance. I showed him the cover without speaking. "Are you a runner?" This time I knew he was talking to me. I nodded and smiled a little and went back to trying to ignore him. I didn't need him. I had spent too much time in and out of relationships and needed to learn how to be alone. Or at least that's what I tried to tell myself. But everyone I knew had someone. My friends were getting married, starting families, growing up. They treated me as though being single was a disease. There was no room for an odd number when they went out in groups of couples. There was no one for me to call and ask to hang out at the last minute on a Friday night. When given the choice of spending time with their someone or me, I lost every time. I was so damn lonely, and he was beautiful, tall with brown eyes and lashes any girl would be jealous of. And my God, he was persistent. He wouldn't stop talking. He stuck out his hand. "I'm Eric. So what do you do for work?" There were still several stops until it was time for me to get off, so I shook his hand and told him about my freelance writing work. He told me about his marketing job for some of the sports teams in town. We discovered that we were both from the West Coast, I from Oregon and he from California. College had brought us both to Chicago. I had stayed because I had a great writing opportunity. He stayed because there was nothing to go back to. My parents died when I was a sophomore. I'm an only child, so there was really nothing for me in California. "Do you have any siblings?" I felt myself soften. Perhaps it was his openness and the genuine interest in my answers to his questions. "I have a sister. She's 7 years older than me. We're not very close." I've always wondered what it would be like to have a sibling that was like a best friend, you know? Someone who was always there. I wonder if it would keep the lonely away when you had no one else. A shadow flitted across his face, but I noticed it, and in that moment I felt a connection with him because he was lonely too. And unlike so many other people I knew, he was not afraid to admit it. I smiled. I think it might. The shadow was replaced with a smile, and his cheeks flushed pink. "So, Anna, what kind of food do you absolutely hate?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. Seafood, the smell, the taste, everything about it. "Broccoli for me. It's awful. So if I were to ask you to go out to dinner with me, we would need a place with no fish and no broccoli." My stomach fluttered. "Are you asking?" "Tomorrow night, the new Italian place on Morse." Of course I agreed. Mile 4, watch time 32 minutes, 7 seconds. I find a nice pocket right behind the pack of 3:30 pace teamers. I won't let thoughts of Eric distract me. The strain of pushing my body gives me needed distance from my memories. I picture each memory passing through my mind and floating way above me like a runaway balloon. As each balloon soars away, I feel lighter and lighter. My legs move effortlessly over the pavement. My breathing is steady and even. This is the closest I've ever come to being free. Mile 5, watch time 39 minutes, 57 seconds. I start to sweat. We run through Lincoln Park and the spectators become noticeably better dressed. The zoo is on our right. When we lived here, we had a love-hate relationship with the zoo. We loved that admission was free and it was a nice place to walk around. We loved to see the animals, but we hated that they were in cages. After a while, I stopped going. I couldn't take the hollow emptiness in their eyes, the way they paced in their enclosures. He still went, though. I think he found comfort in their desperation to escape their cages as he searched for a way out of his own. Often during those final months, he would be gone for hours. When he came home, we always had the same conversation. I'd ask, "How was your day?" His answer was always the same. "Good, I just walked, did some thinking." Then his eyes would narrow and his words became crisp, his enunciation more pronounced. I wasn't drinking or anything, if that's what you're asking. It wasn't what I had asked, but we both knew that's what I had meant. Mile 6, watch time 48 minutes, 3 seconds. I'm cruising through 6 miles. I focus on my breathing. In 3 steps, out 3 steps, a steady rhythm. Our old neighborhood is coming up just past the 10K marker. We cross Diversey. In, out, I concentrate on the breathing. We are running north on Sheridan and our old street runs parallel to it, 2 blocks to the east. We are almost to Belmont, almost into Lakeview. I try to avoid it, but I can't keep myself from glancing to the right. I can see the lake in the distance, charcoal gray sinking beneath the blue sky. We chose to live here because it was close to the lake, the zoo, the running path. One year, a blizzard shut down the entire city. On the morning after the storm, we ventured outside and stumbled over the mountains of snow. The usually hectic street was deserted and noiseless. We stood at the edge of the park and looked out over the vast expanse of white to the east. Even the sky was a colorless splash of bright light. It was impossible to tell where the park ended and where the water began. As I squinted and tried to make out the horizon line, his voice crackled through the silence. "When I'm with you, I feel like this." He swept his gloved hand out toward the frozen water. "Like I don't know where I end and you begin. I'm safe because you're around me. When I'm with you like this, just us here, I don't want anything else. I don't want to drink, I don't want the fog, I want to be here." His words suffocated me. I loosened my scarf, but then he leaned to kiss me, and the heat from his lips made me forget his words. We hurried home and stripped off our snowy clothes as soon as our heavy wooden door thudded shut behind us. We made love on the floor in front of the door. His hands burned as they roamed over my cold skin, warming it inch by inch. The heat from our bodies melted the snow into little lakes around us. There is no snow today, but there is wind. I struggle to force my legs through the resistance, but then it whips up off the lake and swirls north, pushing us forward and away from our old home. The wind understands that I need to get away from here before I can't. Mile 7, watch time 55 minutes, 59 seconds.
Caitlin Murray is a writer and animal enthusiast who resides in the hippest part of Akron, Ohio. She recently graduated from Malone University with a BA in creative writing. She is a part owner of an extroverted cat and an introspective dog. Tonight she'll be reading from her creative nonfiction piece, Conversations.
The sanctuary that serves as a chapel space for my small Christian college is spacious and quiet during most of the day. The high vaulted walls are intermittently lined with abstract stained glass. The lights are warm and dim. I find a corner and sit down, cross-legged, palms facing upwards and resting on my knees. My yoga instructor says that when our palms are facing upwards, we are able to receive grace. I need grace. I start to breathe and notice that my heart is racing. Slowly, slowly, slowly. I repeat. I close my eyes and wait. Before this practice is suggested by a book given to me by my therapist, I thought that meditation was something that was done with a blank mind. My understanding was that in order to meditate, I needed to push away thoughts and awareness. Sometimes that's helpful, but today I'm doing the opposite. Today I'm going to allow anxiety to enter my meditative space. The first to arrive is, as usual, Fat. Her slender frame materializes, and I invite her to sit down. Hello, Fat, I smile wryly. I see that you ran this morning. It won't make a difference, she says. I feel better, though. Doesn't matter. When was the last time you were actually thin? Was it 4 years ago? It's too late. You've let yourself go, and if you think that you will ever be smaller than the size you are now, then you're pretty stupid. I think I like being a size 12. I think I like the way my clothes look. Well, don't count on staying this way. You're only a few bad days away from being as fat as you were last summer. I stay calm, allowing the pain of the last statement to encounter the deep breaths I'm taking until the hurt eventually dissipates. I gaze at Fat for a little longer. She's almost always the first to arrive, but she never stays long. Clinical psychologist Tara Brock calls this act inviting Mara to tea. She describes the way Buddha, after fighting and defeating the demon god Mara, would often be visited by him. Buddha didn't ignore him, nor did he push Mara away or fight him. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of tea and invited Mara to sit down. By doing this, he could remain free. Fat disappears and is replaced by my mother. She looks different here than she does in person. Her blue eyes have turned to black stone. If I reached for her hand, it wouldn't be soft the way it usually is. She's bonier and much more angry. I can feel the anger seething off of her skin. I heard that you quit Student Senate. Why would you do that? Didn't I teach you not to quit things? I was getting exhausted, Mom. It was too much work, and with this recent bout of depression, I just couldn't handle it. I feel so much better now that I don't have to deal with this. You were your college class president. You were going to read at graduation. Your grandmother would have been so proud, and I've already told all of our family. I watch her face morph from anger to disappointment. The fear that I have been acutely noticing deep in my stomach is replaced by a heavy guilt in the back of my throat. Remember when you messed up your ballet routine at your 3rd grade recital? I was so embarrassed. None of the other girls messed up. Remember when you brought home your fiancé and he got drunk at your dad's and then puked all over the white couch? Remember when you told me late one night that you'd had sex with your first boyfriend? Remember how I cried all night? My therapist's office is decorated in warm tones and smells like the vanilla candles that she makes herself. When I sit on the couch, I can feel the tension start to escape from my shoulder blades. One day I come in, barely awake, with my spouse. My body feels dense and rubbery, like cheap bubble gum that's been chewed for too long. I don't want to be here. In our last session, we talked about how hard you are on yourself, she says. I know, and I told you, I don't know how to stop. I honestly don't know how to stop hating myself, because if I did, then I think I would. She sighs. You need to start realizing that you are a person of value. You always view yourself as worse than everyone else. You need to start accepting the parts of you that are flawed, because you know what? Everyone is flawed. You're not garbage, you're human. Do you think I have a personality disorder? I haven't ever asked this question. I don't. You have the opposite of a personality disorder. You don't think that you're always right, you think you're always wrong. Oh. So do you think I'm bipolar? Yes. Bipolar disorder is a bitch, not just to medicate, but to deal with as well. And while it's not unusual for something like bipolar disorder to be paired with an anxiety disorder, it is, according to my psychiatrist, a very bad combination. Bipolar disorder catches me off guard. Bipolar disorder waits until Fat and my mother have left, and only visits when eyes are closed and thoughts enter into complete darkness. Bipolar disorder likes that. Hi, Caitlin. Remember me? Oh, have you forgotten? Well, I suppose the Wellbutrin is doing you a solid. Bipolar, go away. You'd better be kidding me. You've read the articles, right? You know that I'm not going anywhere. Bipolar disorder can be treated, but not cured. Fuck off. You probably inherited this from your mother. You plan on adopting children, right? Because bipolar disorder is most likely hereditary. Would you wish this kind of suffering on your own child? Leave me the fuck alone. Bipolar disorder can be treated but not cured. That means for the rest of your life, no matter how happy or content you are, I will be waiting. I will wait until you feel airy and free, and I will paint heavy lead onto every square inch of your skin. I will tie an anchor to all 4 of your limbs, and we will watch you sink together. I'm getting better. I haven't had a truly debilitating bout of depression in over a year. You think you're getting better, but you know what? You can't control this. This cannot be fixed. You don't get to decide not to be depressed. And next time is going to be much worse. You know why? It's because, right, bipolar disorder can be treated, but not cured. Thank you.
So our featured artist for this issue is Georgia Casamillas, who also was our featured artist in the last issue because she's pretty great. And she would like to speak a little bit on her art, which, by the way, is on a slideshow back there for like intermission. You can go and enjoy it.
Hello, everyone. Again, as Jordan said, my name is Georgia Casamillas. And I'd just like to read off my artist statement that I had attached during, on my submission with these photographs. So here goes. These photographs, taken on film, seek to capture the complexity of female energy. To be a woman, that is, to identify as a woman, is to be the other in many instances in our society. Although much progress has been made via legal actions towards equality, women are still subjected to the male gaze. Our primary success is our looks. Accomplishments of other forms come secondary. As a female photographer, am I aware then of my own gaze? Am I reproducing the male gaze? As a photographer, am I simply trying to portray the woman as beautiful, or as sexy, or as fuckable? Moreover, am I only representing a heteronormative demographic, or am I inclusive of women of color or trans women? Does it even matter? Photographers represent others, and the politics of representation are not easily waded through. I have no easy answers. And so it goes. The photographs represented here reveal women who hold their own gaze. Gaze is not paying heed to the photographer, and bodies not posing to be anything else but themselves. Only does my self-portrait reveal eyes looking directly at the lens, critical of my own gaze. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to continue on with the rest of our readings for tonight. So next up is Christy Gearhart. Christy Gearhart is an interdisciplinary art student at Youngstown State University who uses mixed media to explore and challenge the stereotypes and timeless obstacles of being female. Tonight she'll be reading her poem, Wing Night.
I used to see this guy who was made out of chicken bones. He took me on the cheapest dates. Mondays were wing night, Sundays were wing night, every night was wing night. His feelings were mild, and even though he refused to call me his girlfriend, I was a fool to think his heart would always be dripping in my hot sauce.
Amelia Zom lives in rural northeastern Oregon and spends her time in the mountains, valleys, and canyons of Wallowa County, either on foot or on horseback. Her writing focuses on the connection between place, history, a discovery of self, and the ways in which a perfectly ordinary life might provide some sort of insight into the magical world we each inhabit. Her piece, Tending History, will be read by Issue 11 Assistant Editor Amy Williamson.
I tug hard on nylon laces, snugging shoes to feet. Dad's birthday. I feel the loss deeply today, not just of him, but of my mother and my grandfather as well. Looking around, I recall bits of the life we lived together in this house. Although the ceilings are high and the room spacious, my history here often sits on my chest like an elephant. I stand and stretch, stepping outside to fill my lungs and clear my head. Summer arrived late this year. With the 4th of July just around the corner, the grass blanketing the hills behind my home still waves with the brilliant green of spring, rolling away from the deep blue of timbered lands out north. Crane's bill, lupine, Gaillardia, normally brown and crumbled by mid-June, dot the landscape with pink, purple, and yellow. White yarrow blooms, filling the air with its pungent scent. The steady strike of my feet on the dirt road and the rhythm of my breathing lulls the chatter of my mind and allows me to notice. Meadow foxtail and Medusa head ryegrass threaten to overwhelm native bunchgrass on the south-facing slopes. Barbed wire droops and hangs in need of staples to anchor it back to a post. In the draw, the stock pond overflows and grass stands tall, a good omen for fall grazing. My journey home began in stages and took nearly 6 years to complete. The circumstances of my parents' health, first my mother's heart disease and later my father's grief and dementia, conspired to interrupt my roaming lifestyle, the years I spent wandering the West in search of some purpose, some place that felt like home. A rented room in Wenatchee, an orchard shack in Hood River, a mother-in-law apartment in Albuquerque. These fenced yards were a far cry from the 1,000 acres of dry land, range, and timber that now surround me. When Mom first got sick, trips home became more frequent, and after her death, my visits to check out my dad grew longer each time. Eventually, I found myself, 20 years to the month of my departure for college, moving home to the property I would soon inherit. In 1914, my grandfather purchased this property with a dream of raising premium Hereford cattle in this growing county, and my grandmother left her family to follow this determined German man. Together, they built a home, raised a family, and became well-respected members of Wallowa County, Oregon. I climbed the hill each morning, letting my dogs stretch their legs as they searched the rock patches and draws for rock chucks, doves, and Hungarian partridge. Across the undulating prairie, the main road moves east. Farther north, remnants of the original homestead still stand. Ancient trees dot plums and crab apples, no longer gathered for preserves and jellies. The enormous double pine, large enough 90 years ago to hold my grandmother and her sister standing side by side in its crook, still shades the meadow. The house, the outhouse, the barn, bunkhouse, and outbuildings are gone, some absorbed by the land, others moved on skids, pulled by teams of mules down the hill to the new valley home site. The move brought the heart of the ranch closer to town, the main roads, and the school. As the stories go, my grandmother Nina initiated the move. With 3 school-age daughters and a toddler to contend with, she finally put her foot down. I never met Grandma, but growing up with her 4 strong-minded daughters and seeing pictures of her upright posture and unwavering gaze, I can imagine how the conversation went. Fritz, it's time we had a new house, closer to the school. I don't like the girls having to ride those horses back and forth every day. The winters are too cold, there is too much snow, and in good weather, they only get into mischief. Well, we'll see. We need to get the harvest in, and, well then, hands on her hips, brows knit, we will just see. Fritz Weinhard, if there isn't a house closer to that school by the beginning of the next grade, the girls and I will move into town until there is. They moved into the newly constructed house that fall. The big red barn followed, carefully skidded down the hill with the teams of mules used to pull wagons, plows, and combines. Grandpa then added a milking barn, new bunkhouse, and a second barn. Sitting on the porch, Grandma could see the one-room red brick schoolhouse, now just a quarter mile away. I know Grandma Nina only through pictures and stories. My cousin Judy speaks of Grandma's generosity, her faith, and her resolve. In photos, she often wears a hat. Her eyes appear thoughtful and steady, her face calm. As she smiles, only the corners of her mouth turn up. Her presence still inhabits the big house beside her father, Byron Miller, built at his son-in-law's request. The house where my mother grew up, the house where I grew up, the house I live in now. Nina died in this house peacefully, sleeping in her chair. She had recently received joyous news. Her youngest daughter, married and childless for 15 years, was pregnant. Nina died in September. I was born in March. Elements of her life hover in every nook and cranny: the ironing board that drops down from the wall, the huge dumbwaiter used to bring wood from the basement to fuel the kitchen stoves, both of them, and the laundry chute with doors on the first and second stories emptying into the basement. The weeping birch trees she planted, now enormous, shade the yard and whisper in summer's late afternoon breezes. Efficient, strong, intelligent, opinionated, but also witty, faithful, and kind. This is how my older cousins describe her. Grandma did so much good and worked so hard, Linda told me. She intimidated me a little. She set such a good example. I wasn't sure I'd be able to live up to it. I look for these traits of hers in myself, but rarely find them. When I wander the hallways of her house, I confront the particles, the ghosts of my own past still lingering here, the confusion of puberty, the despair of adolescence, the panic of preparing to leave home, the fear of disappointing my parents. Turning to face them, I often feel Grandma Nina beside me, hands on her hips, encouraging me. I wonder if any of her faith or strength of character flows through my veins.
Kaylee Sherrick is currently a graduate candidate at the Northeast Ohio Master of Fine Arts program, where she focuses on honing her creative nonfiction skills. She currently serves as the essay editor for Whiskey Island magazine and works for the Confucius Institute at Cleveland State University as a writing assistant. When she isn't writing about living and working in the Rust Belt, she enjoys spending time with her family, gardening, and ruining dinner parties by talking about the big three: sex, politics, and religion. Tonight she'll be reading from her piece, God Speaks to Grandfather.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if this will work for me. Okay. My knees were killing me. The acrid scent of spick and span mixed with Old English lemon oil was burning my eyes and causing my nose to drip profusely, starting a vicious cycle of sniff, wipe, repeat. I had been washing the baseboard of my grandmother's house all afternoon, and the finish line was in sight. The white molding, still wet and gleaming in the late afternoon sun, would surely be inspected by my grandmother later, but I was ready to be done. The last room, my grandfather's room, was cleaned. The only thing left was to move all of the large antique furniture back into the same arrangement it had been in since the 1970s, save for the recent addition of a medical bed. I heaved and hauled wooden dressers, nightstands, and tables back into position, envious of my grandfather, who sat in the living room watching television while my grandmother cooked roast and mashed potatoes for dinner. The last piece of furniture to move was a small, quaint kneeler with a rosary hanging off the side, the same make as those placed in front of caskets at funeral homes. As I slid the kneeler across the floor, praying like hell it wouldn't scratch the hardwood, the rosary clinked and clattered against the side. I placed my hand over the rosary to stifle the noise and noticed a small drawer beneath the podium. I had never seen the drawer before, even though I'd played on the kneeler since I was a child. I would place my bony knees on the cushion and clasp my hands together, bowing my shaggy blonde head into my knuckles. I would clamp my eyes shut, closing them so tightly that they ached, and pretend to be in the throes of a fervent, possessive prayer, the same way I had watched my grandfather play. I stood there with one hand still holding the rosary, while the other traced the plain, round knob on the drawer. Curiosity overcame me, and I slid the drawer open. Inside, I found a pocket-sized version of the New Testament, a small book of prayers, a step-by-step guide to saying the rosary, and almost obstructed from view behind these items was a long white envelope. Grasping one of the corners, I slid the envelope out of its hiding place. On the front, in large, recognizable, blocky letters, my grandfather had written a message. To whom it may concern, if anyone. Something urgent and anxious was set loose inside my body, a raw need to see what was inside the envelope, to lay eyes on whatever it was my grandfather had hidden from view. I flipped the envelope over and looked at the back side, sealed. Could I steam it open? Could I tear into it and forge his writing on a new envelope? Would he notice it was missing? I went over to the window and held it up to the sunlight. The paper inside was thick and folded over, possibly more than one page. I couldn't decipher a word. I knew I was holding something secret, something I wasn't meant to find, or at least something I wasn't meant to find at that time. I stared at those blocky letters on the front, my brain unable to make the bridge between the alphabetical arrangement and its meaning. I held the letter to the window until my trance was broken by the sound of creaking floorboards as my grandmother's heavy footfalls moved down the hall. I placed the letter back behind the books and shut the drawer with a snap. Later that evening, as I ate dinner with my parents, I decided to ask my father about the envelope. We were sitting in the living room, plates on our laps, watching a movie, enjoying what we jokingly called quality family time. I found something while I was cleaning upstairs, I said, placing my cleared plate on the coffee table. My father averted his eyes from the television. Was it porn? He asked with a small crooked smile that crept onto his bearded face. Gross. No, I found a letter in Grandpa's room. What did it say? The corners of his mouth fell as he glanced in my direction. I don't know. It was a sealed envelope. The front said, to whom it may concern, if anyone. That's all there was. My father set his fork down and rubbed his eyes, then ran his hands through his hair. He stayed quiet. What is it? Do you know? I asked, leaning forward and placing my elbows on my knees. My guess is we weren't meant to find that until after he was supposed to die last year. Die? He didn't die last year. Obviously. You know how we got the new generator, the wood burner, and filled up the petroleum tank all within a month? I nodded. I remembered how my father had scrambled around that entire summer, how harried and worn he had appeared. My father let out a heavy sigh and continued, he said God told him he was going to die, had a date set and everything. What the fuck? Watch your language, young lady, and forget about the letter, okay? It's nothing to get concerned about. Well, I'm already concerned. If Grandpa wants to die, then, or if Grandpa thinks he wants to die, then he doesn't just think. He wants to die. He's going to die. It was my turn to be silent. My father and I stared at random spots on the carpet, falling into a mutual discomfort. This was the first time I ever heard about my grandfather's voices, and the first time I realized he had lost the will to live. Degenerative nerve and muscle disease is agonizingly slow. It creeps, eroding the brainstem little by little. The first thing to go is motor function. I have no memories of my grandfather walking unaided and very few of him needing only a cane. For the majority of my life, he has used a walker, propelling himself forward, mainly using his arms while his feet dragged sideways behind him like a lame dog. The next thing to dissipate is the ability for speech. His once booming voice has turned into a wheeze, and he shouts to raise his tone above a whisper. At this stage, forming each word takes a huge amount of effort. In between sentences, there are heaving sighs and gasps for air. What little laughter can be drawn from his body leaves him breathless. It's as if the body is slowly decaying even though the heart still beats. At the end of its course, my grandfather's lungs will be too weak to function properly. He will be able to inhale, but unable to exhale. He will suffocate to death. As I got older and his disease progressed, it was a common occurrence to hear my grandfather through the thin tiled ceiling as he yelled and cursed at God. Whenever he lost control of his bowels, whenever he had a stomach pain, when he fell, almost anything could send him into a screaming frenzy, yelling as loudly as he could, "You bastards, you sons of bitches." During one of those shouting matches with the voices in his head, my grandfather got up, rolled to the wall, grabbed the frame print of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and smashed it on the ground. He also took a crucifix and hurled it across the room. After this incident, Grandma and my parents convinced him to see a doctor, who referred him to a psychiatrist, who referred him to a neurologist. My family wanted answers as to what was causing the voices. Was it dementia? Was it his disease? Was it something else entirely? Leading up to the appointment, I spent a few hours researching on Google, which, in retrospect, was a terrible idea. Somehow, I landed on neurosyphilis, courtesy of WebMD. A few days later, I found myself sitting in my grandparents' living room. My grandfather was watching Life is Worth Living on EWTN. The black and white image of Bishop Sheen was parading around the screen in his 1950s Catholic regalia, proclaiming the Word of God with closed captions so my grandmother could follow along. It struck me how much Bishop Sheen looked like Lon Chaney. I shuddered. Grandpa, I know this is an odd question, but how long has it been since you've had an STD screen? He let his head loll in my direction. The once full, neatly trimmed black beard had thinned and turned gray. It was growing wild, with long, wispy hairs protruding down his neck. His perfect, proud posture was slumped and contorted. His skin seemed to hang from his frame. He looked like a ghost, like a shell. He opened his mouth and took in air. I could almost hear it rattle as his chest expanded. Oh, not since I got back from the war. Have you ever had any STDs? Well, I caught something from a prostitute in Korea, but I got treated. I felt the heat in my face reach a boiling point, and my eyes darted over to grandmother, who sat beside me in her lift chair. She lost her hearing completely in one ear when she was young and had recently had a cochlear implant placed in the other after it suddenly gave out one morning. The red light on the implant was blazing. She could hear him. She knows, my grandfather said, slowly casting his hand in her direction. I told her when I got back. And how long has it been since you and Grandma, had sex? I cringed as the word escaped my mouth. Probably about 30 years. Why? I was doing research. Syphilis can remain dormant in the body for a very long period of time. If it isn't treated properly, it can cause visual and auditory hallucinations. It could explain the voices. They aren't just voices. He was leaning forward in his chair, his face fully turned towards me. His eyes looked like they burned with fever. His cheeks were flushed. Last night, the Holy Mother and Jesus walked me through masturbation. They showed me what to do. I looked over at my grandmother again. She was still watching the television, seemingly unfazed. I noticed the red light on her implant had gone dark. She'd shut it off. The Holy Mother dangled the image of a woman I loved and lost above me. She had been mine before I met your grandmother. I didn't treat her right. She got married to a man who treated her worse. Grandpa, this isn't God, Mary, and Jesus. They aren't tormenting you. It is, goddammit. He slammed his hand with a force that he could muster, with as much force as he could muster on the arms of the chair. We're going to skip that part because it's got a lot of bad words in it. My grandmother and I sat at her kitchen table, munching on potato chips and chocolate milk. It was late. My grandfather had gone to bed for the evening. She was keeping watch. The previous night, my grandfather had mustered up enough strength to get out of bed, slide his walker to the end of the house, climb down the steps to the garage, and get in the car. He started it and sat there with the garage doors closed. My grandmother smelled the fumes and was able to stop him after only a few minutes. That dumbass, she said between crunches. It never would have worked. The garage has too many air holes. Thank you.
Annie King is the editor-in-chief and founder of Syntax and Salt, a journal of magical realism. Annie currently resides in Lansing, Michigan with her family and her day job. Her story, Our Mouths Are Stained with Bitterness, Raising Isaac, will be read by the issue 11 fiction editor, Christopher Alonso.
You are surprised at how tart pomegranate juice is. First time Abram works the seeds out of the sacred fruit with blunt fingers. He offers small bright scoops up again and again, his own lips red and wet like a woman's from sharing, and neither of you can help but giggle. You look so beautiful, brother, you say, smiling. So often he is serious as a stone, back bent from labor and prayer. After, you lie together on the ground, palm to palm, but not speaking. In time, you cannot count the number of seeds you've eaten, waiting for just one to take root in your aging body. Your fingers are stained up to the first knuckle, redder than your Cushite skin, red as blood, but you have not entered the woman's tent in a long time, and being bloodless means being childless. After all the fertility treatments and Abe's affair with the Sarah, 1980, Georgia. After all the fertility treatments and Abe's affair with a pretty church secretary and her son, their son, with a face so much like your husband's, fierce and dark, after you've given up, it happens. But not before you are forced to sit on the red carpeted floor of Covenant Southern Baptist Church while Abe and the elders pray for your barren womb, referencing the original Sarai and shouting in tongues for hours. Lord, give us a son, a healthy boy to lead people to your glory and light, Abe begs. Nothing so weakly made as a girl will do for him. Everyone, put your hands on Sarah and be faithful that God is with us. In the end, it isn't the invasive questions or sterile procedures or the humiliation of all these post-sermon prayers that catch you. Instead, it's cheap red wine that you share in the driveway that opens your womb, while you try to decide if one of you will make a break for it. Get out while you can. I never wanted this, never wanted children. I was doing this for you. Neither of you have told anyone about the treatments. It was important to appear faithful, long after you lost all remnants. I don't know, Sarah. What is it you want me to say? Abe asks in that voice, the one that God speaks through, booming and rich. Say you don't need this from me, that we can stop. Say God doesn't expect this from us. Say that it's you, and it always has been. Baby, please, you know I'm sorry. It feels good to watch the rest of Abe's faith bend and yield a bit, just enough for the surface to break. And that's the moment where you love him again, when you remember what he was like when you were young. In the morning, you retrieve clothing and shoes from the living room, where a glass is tipped over and wine bleeds across the beige carpet. Your mouth is dry and purple, and you feel like crying. I'm leaving you, you tell him, and he looks relieved. You find out about the baby on the day Reagan is elected, just after packing all your things. God is great, Abe intones. The following Sunday, looking at every face but yours from his pulpit. Look what he's done for Sarah and me. He holds his hand out to you, and you smile as best you can. You certainly can't leave now. Sarah, 1090, Armenia. You swell and your flesh stains and stretches. You want dark cherries, tart and cool, all the time. Pushing the seeds out and wearing the fruit on your fingers, then popping them off one at a time with your teeth and chewing slowly, has become one of the most pleasurable moments you can imagine. If not for the lurid meat of the cherries, you might not be able to tolerate any food at all. Not the fragrantly spiced meat Abraham wants you to eat for strength, not the chewy bread other women swear will help. Alhamud Ilah, Ibrahim says every time he spreads his hands across your expansive body. Our son will be a great man, Sarah, a very great man. Sometimes he will pluck a cherry from your thumb with his teeth and let his tongue linger. Like his father, you say, and his ancient face splits like a walnut when he smiles. God has done so much for us, he demurs. What has God done for me? You used to ask when month after month you bled, but now your back aching, breasts so pained you believe he has favored you. And you are fond of your husband more than ever before. Especially now, he will bring you anything you ask. This isn't a surprise. Ibrahim was kind from the start and has cherished your hands, your legs, your black river of hair with nothing but indulgence. You gaze out past the lemon tree into the horizon where the muezzin calls out the azan, his voice dipping and soaring like a hawk. Inside, the child you always prayed for turns and swoops as if flying. Alhamdulillah, you murmur. Sarita, 2007, Spain. Birth was not pain you could prepare for. Your body opens like the impossible mouth of a snake from a time-lapse film you once played for your students in science class, but in reverse, as if the snake's prey is wriggling its way out, and you bite down hard on your lip. Abraham, I've changed my mind, you shout, teeth bared. So you look like some savage old woman from some untouched place in the world. You try to catch your own eye in the rectangular mirror, but the nurse positions it again, so you are forced to gaze at the pulpy swollen red of your vulva. In the short instant where you can breathe, right before the baby crowns, you look across the room at Abraham, whose hands are liver spotted and trembling already, and you cannot help but laugh out loud like a dog barking. We've made a mistake, you try to say, but the words are lost in the agony of bearing down. The bells of Al-Menuda Cathedral sound out just when the baby slips the rest of the way out. They ring 7 times, old and heavy and serious as your breasts have become. You call your son Isaac, and you kiss his head, anointing him with blood as you wait for the moment when you will love him. Te amo, hijo mío, you whisper, while you take your antidepressants and wait to feel anything at all. Just remember how much we wanted this, Abraham offers. At times, he is incapable of helping. Diapers baffle him and his arthritic hands. But he will hold the baby against his chest all night so that you can sleep. What will you do someday when he is gone? What were you thinking, having a child at this age? Sai, 1570, Japan. Suddenly your home is full of silence, so loud that it deafens you further. Old ears, not what they used to be. Aisaku flinches away from his father as if he is a mere servant, not a pampered and adored son. You have to look away from Jun, unable to reconcile the betrayal on your husband's face with the man who cradled this boy in his ancient hands and wept openly at his cloud of black hair and shell-pink mouth. It was a gift he offered you, Jun finally shouts, a gift to enter into the daimyo's service. It is not the gift I would ask, Aisaku says firmly, before turning his back. It doesn't matter. I promised him you would serve. Before you were even born, you don't have a choice. And then you understand. Your son does not wish the hot breath of an old man's empire, no matter how powerful, on his neck. Nor does he wish to lay his body down on his father's altar of swords and history. You sympathize, but you do not intervene. That would be unforgivable. Jun worships the daimyo, Yasuda Matebi, and always has. He would give the ancient man every grain of rice, every shred of fabric, anything he could, if his loyalty and sword were not enough. In fact, you have resented this as much as your son and more. And what then is Jun offering in his promises to Yasuda Matebe? Just the most beloved of everything Jun has to give, Aisaku's future sword, his future grains and fabric, the pacing worry of his future wife. You recite a poem by Shotetsu to break the silence. With what harshness they come blowing towards me, the mountain winds from deep within the heart of one who asks no lodging. You wake and feel the violence still in the air. You wish Jun would stop coming for you and stick to his concubines. He always looks at your body as if it has betrayed him by aging. And yes, at times it seems one moment you were a girl and the next you were so old, but time has been no kinder to Jun. The feeling doesn't pass by. Instead, it travels over your skin like winter winds and ruffles your hair. It carries your son's familiar cry of surprise with the chill. If you moved a little more easily in the morning, you would leap out of bed, but instead, hobble to the window and see the child of your winter years being pulled across the courtyard to a horse laden with supplies. No, Aisaku is not really a child. He is too nearly a man. I must do this. You are a gift. The thing I love most, Jin announces to the morning air. I promised, son, I must keep my word. Aisaku stops fighting and kneels before his father and lowers his head. You can still taste salty shoyu and semen on your lips. And even though you should not speak, you cry out, scream at a volume you did not know you were capable of, and shatter the morning. No, Jun, not our son. And your heart stops. Just like that, you crumble. It might please you to know Jun runs to you and that he weeps. Despite his sorrow, Jun won't utter your name again, not when you have demanded with your dying breath that he break his word. Still, he won't send Aisaku to serve Yasuda Matebe, who will fall with all his men in open battle on the side of a hill. Aisaku's star will still rise, without you and because of you. Once again, you have given your son life.
Angel Cezanne is a queer feminist zine queen, editor of Eleanor Zine, and an occasional freelance writer who graduated from Kent State University, which means she has bad credit but good vibes. To close out tonight, she'll be reading her poem, For Sinners, for Poets.
This is called For Sinners for Poets, and it was written following the Wick Poetry Center's alumni poetry reading in September of 2014. I have been to many churches. At the church where my parents met, the Sunday school teacher held my left hand behind my back and forced me to cut with right-handed scissors. We worshiped in a closed theater with red carpet and plastic seats, leading down to a small stage where the pastor stood before a movie screen. We met in a closed diner, a checkerboard floor below, my feet dangling from a red booth and Bibles wide out on the counter. In a church by a lake where we fed geese, a young girl we later learned had been molested removed her pantyhose and asked my sister to take hers off too. When my parents couldn't pay their bills, we found refuge in church basements. The Baptists served spaghetti on the second Tuesday, and the Orthodox fed us the first Wednesday. A picky eater, I reluctantly cleaned my plate. As a teenager, I sat crooked in pews of several churches, some with stained glass that hid sunny days behind apostles, and one lined with flags of countries where they had sent white missionaries to save brown people from damnation. Ashamed for liking a girl the way other girls liked boys, I was sure that no God could love me when I hated myself. I have been to many churches, but none like this. Below a white canopy erected like a tent at a festival, a man told me he suffers from depression, left numb to joys or woes, except for in the company of others. And when I read that I had never loved myself until I loved my partner, it reminded him that he could feel. Our congregation held hands, thought of tendons popping and our knuckles pulleys in the mechanism of the body, thought of how those hands worked, collecting calluses, and made love, caressing the bodies of our respective gods. We smelled leaf mold, the forest floor, the smell of life, and we did not walk but strolled beyond the remnants of bridges burned to ash, given back to the arms of the earth. We spoke to our ghosts and refused consolation, our sins forgiven by the sunshine that bent around the canopy and left sweat on our upper lips. When we rose to read a poem, to make a testimonial, we were free.
Okay, so that's it for the premiere. I just want to do a litany of thank yous here for my closing statements. I want to thank you all for coming out, showing your support for Jenny Magazine. It's awesome, and it makes me feel really good as editor of Jenny Magazine that you guys all come and you support us doing our literary thing. I want to give shout outs to my staff. If you want to all stand so people know who you are. And also, Amanda, who's just sitting. And I want to give a shout out to our faculty advisor, Chris Barzak, for all his support. Our web guy, I think he left. He was here. Okay, well, we'll just shout out to him, regardless of the fact that he's not here. Because without him, the magazine literally wouldn't be put together, because I don't know how to do all that stuff, and it looks awesome. And then, a shout out, thank you to, everyone that we published in the issue, and then all the people who submitted, which probably aren't here, but that's okay. They were all awesome as well, because we did get a lot of submissions. And this has just been a really great time working on this issue. I really enjoy it. Super excited. It is live currently on our website, jennymag.org, so make sure to go home and read it all. There's a lot of good material in there. And then also, we will be opening back up for submissions for issue 12 this coming Monday, which is the 21st, I believe. And so it'll be a regular issue. It's not a specially themed issue, accepting 10-minute plays, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and art from anyone from anywhere, although we do favor local artists and writers, hint, hint, to send their work. But we're also going to be holding another contest. This one is going to be a flash fiction contest. Maximum 1,000 words, theme open up to whatever you want to write about. And there's cash prizes. So if you write flash fiction or you want to try to win money, and go ahead and write flash fiction. We'll be opening up for all of those on Monday, and we'll be open through February 4th, I believe will be our closing date. And that is on our submittable page, jennymag.submittable.com. There's also a link on our website for our submittable page if you don't want to remember that lengthy long thing. That's it. That's all I've got. Thank you for coming out and having a nice night.